Let's talk about dialogue. Do you tell the characters what to say, or are you almost hearing them tell you? Do you?
It's a good question. I think in dialogue, they kind of say that you can't really teach somebody how to write dialogue. You can show somebody how to write more tightly or more naturally, but basically dialogue is something that you either have a feel for or you don't. I mean, it's not like teaching structure or something like that. I think it's a combination of the two things you said. I think your characters are speaking to you. Hopefully, you've created a unique enough character, or a character with a strong enough sense of who they are, or what their, how you would describe that character and what their journey is going to be, emotional journey is going to be, that the words they don't write themselves necessarily, but it's like the track that the train is running on. So you know what the character is about, you know where they're going to go, you know what they're doing right, you know what they're doing wrong, and what you want them to be and how they talk needs to match that basis of who they are, if that's clear. So there's that. You find that when you start writing dialogue, sometimes the characters talk differently than you expect. That evolves, and that can be very interesting. And sometimes your character changes as a result of your dialogue. But by and large, we're using our voices, we're using voices of people we know, we're using cadences, we're using regional, words. It's a combination of a lot of things, but it does, in a way, it does write itself. You're the driver, but it does kind of roll out. But again, a dialogue, it's about how do you write natural dialogue? How do you write the way people really speak? And it's cadence, and it's simplicity of words. It's expressing, saying the most amount of ideas and the least amount of letters, basically, the least amount of words, and to keep it all moving forward. So it's hard. I think you kind of either write good dialogue or you don't. I think it's a tough one.
Well, for your stage plays, is rehearsal really the only place that you can kind of try out to see if that dialogue for the character works?
Yeah, rehearsals are critical. We're reading through the play. My director's dividing the play into beats and sections, and we're really focusing on, after we've read through it all together, now we're focusing on the individual words and to see exactly what's working, and what words really don't quite make sense, or what did I have in my mind that the actresses aren't necessarily feeling or getting, or they don't quite know how to say it, or the director isn't sure. And that's an amazing process. It's like a fantastic process. So being able to hone the words, it's kind of rare. Just doing a table read of your script before something is produced, which doesn't always happen, is really, really helpful. You have to hear other voices other than the ones in your head. You have to hear them say the words.
So it sounds like for scripts, then you wouldn't always get a chance. You might just get notes back.
Right, you get a lot of notes back, mm-hmm. but if unless you on your own before you turn in a script gather some actors and try to test it out, you can do that. But by and large, you write a script, you turn it in, you get notes, and then the notes come with dialogue issues. I don't understand this line, this isn't funnier, love that line, this works, this doesn't, could you add a little bit, put a little twist on it, that's duplicated, that kind of thing. Which is very helpful, and it's all like, I look at the scripts as just this big piece of clay that you're constantly molding and shaping, and it's just sort of moving with and trying to find the shape to it, and until you have your the piece of pottery that you're trying to make. It's a lot of changes. They always say writing is rewriting. And that's really and that's so important. I'm a big believer in rewriting. I'm fine about rewriting as long as it makes sense, and it's not just to do it. Because you do make things better. You can't get it on one fell swoop. At least I can't. You have to write and rewrite and sort of really work on it and really think about it and get some distance from the material too. So that you can sort of look at it with your own fresh eyes, and you have a much better sense of what works and what doesn't work.
I find some of the most interesting dialogue just being in LA and hearing two people for maybe like less than a minute.
Right.
And you could take so much from that.
Right.
Do you ever do that? Because you could build a whole
all the time.
world
I'm
off
always
that.
hearing things, writing things down, writing down expressions like, oh my God, what a great expression. What does that mean? I'm going to take that. Just the dynamic between people, kinds of relationships. Who's talking to who at the supermarket, listening to a couple arguing or being too nice to each other or whatever it is. You know, it's fascinating. I'm always writing things down. Yeah.
So in terms of being a writer and wanting to add that dialogue, how much are you paying attention to seeing a couple in a restaurant, let's say, and maybe little is being said and you can tell there's like some tension or something?
Right. Well, you know, a lot is said without being said at all. There's always that, you know, and subtext is very important in your writing. So you're not just, you know, you're not just, you know, it's not just, the dialogue has like some depth to it, and what they're saying is not necessarily what they mean. You know, they're saying A to really mean B because their intention is C. You know, there's that, so there are different layers to the dialogue. And sometimes, honestly, you don't know about that until you write it, and until you look back on it and say, wow, that was kind of interesting, or like that speech didn't really go in the direction I thought it would, and yet it's kind of an interesting twist. You know, but you just try to make it real. You try to make it the way real people interact in real situations. If it's that kind, certainly if it's that kind of movie.
So do you recommend that to other writers in terms of getting enriching dialogue?
Yes, pay attention. Pay attention to the world around you. And you know, something I watch. I'll watch a movie or something on TV or whatever, and I'll look at like the run of dialogue. It'll just be a phenomenal speech, you know, and by, you know, phenomenal piece of dialogue. You know, I loved The Newsroom, the Aaron Sorkin show, the HBO show, and you know, I would literally just look at just play back over and over the certain sections of that show and the way that dialogue was constructed. And you know, he's such a genius in terms of constructing dialogue and the words that he has as people use. But you can learn so much from that. You can be so inspired and then put your own voice into that kind of thing. And again, a lot of writing dialogue is cadence and personality and things like that. And trying to have characters sound different, you know, so that not every character sounds exactly the same. You know, you give every character their own voice, which is tricky. It's hard to do, but that's also really important. And you have to create you have to create character, you know, beneath, you know, character that's kind of driving that dialogue for that, even if it's just a supporting character, somebody we don't see very much. But yeah, you gotta pay attention to what's around you. It's, you know, the best things are out of reality.
Also, too, what about writing for a specific time period? I mean, you would take, let's say, two men in the 40s in a newsroom who are going to speak in probably much more of an eloquent fashion versus sort of the bro culture of today, which is more dude, you know.
Yeah, it's very, very different, very different. Look, people in the 70s and 80s talk differently in the 90s and the 00s, you know. I mean, it's or the 40s, the 50s, it's all very different. But the basic way of communicating, you know, having clear, interesting words that lead you to a particular point. That's always what it is. It's how you get there. It's been a little bit different. And writing anything I've written that's had interestingly, I wrote a Christmas movie for Hallmark a few years ago, and there were flashbacks to the 1920s. And I had to write dialogue that seemed about right for the 1920s, and it was just cadence. You know, it was just being a little bit more formal. You know, a little bit more on the nose maybe with some of the things that were said, and it was fine, you know, and it just, I think it worked, you know. I mean, it wasn't about going back and saying, now what word did they use in the 1920s for, you know, automobile, you know, or something. I mean, it wasn't that, it was a feeling, it was a texture to the words. So that can be really fun, you know, because we don't exactly know how people talked. I mean, yes, we have movies from back then and we can see, but we're still filtering those things through a contemporary perspective. So it's not going to be quite like it was back then. And you want people to be able to relate to it and understand it.